The media and politicians are attempting to use the U.S. public just like they did during the elections. Welcome back to Survival Existence. Good morning. Welcome back to Survival Existence. I'm going to share with you a few thoughts this morning about the media and the political apparatus in this country. It's not limited to just simply the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but anyone who has a particular political issue to purport. The media and politicians are attempting to use the United States public just like they did during the elections. But if you'll notice, most of them are careful about what they say. They want to always have plausive deniability, which, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, is that if they say something, they'll say it in such a way that they will be able to come back when it's found out to not be true, that they'll be able to come back and say, well, that's not exactly what I said. What I said was blah, blah, blah. This is what it meant. Sorry way to go about operations, but nonetheless, that's what goes on. Right now, and as is most of the time the case in recent history with the type of media we have, not only television and radio, but Facebook, Snapchat, and all the other various media available to the public. Quite often, this plausive denial that politicians will use ends up being nothing more than a false narrative. And an excellent example recently, very recently, is the so-called hacking of the DNC's, or Democratic National Committee's, email, and also Hillary Clinton's. There are some people that are politicians that are taking what has been said by the CIA and adding to what was said far more than what was actually said. The CIA and the FBI and most other U.S. intelligence agencies agree that the Soviets hacked the U.S. during this most recent election, which all I can say to that is, duh, they hack us all the time. We hack them all the time. They hack several other countries, as does our country. This is the thing our so-called spooks do. They're taking that very minor duh statement and turning it into, they're saying that, and if you'll notice, they're being very, very careful about what they say. They are leading the public to believe that the Soviets hacked into our election system and got Donald Trump elected. Well, in the first place, the vast majority of voting machines are not hooked to the internet. They can't be hacked. It's just that simple. It would, while it's not absolutely impossible, they'd have to be in close proximity. And as many voting machines are in most polls, it's all but impossible, and therefore highly unlikely. But they're leading the American public to believe this, or they're attempting to. Now, the American public, of course, during this last election, is no secret, got tired of the false narrative and pretty much lies that was coming out of the media. They realized very early on, long before the emails were exposed from Hillary Clinton or the DNC, that the media was actually working with them. Not just media like on the internet with Facebook and Snapchat, but also the major news services, whether it's the Associated Press, NBC, ABC, CBS. It became very apparent to the public. The public was, of course, angered by this, and their anger showed at the polls. But that's not the reason Hillary Clinton was not elected president. Hillary Clinton was not elected president because people dislike her. And as most of us on this channel are aware, even back during Bill Clinton's presidential administration, the public did not like Hillary Clinton. And if you'll think back, you'll remember early on in Clinton's first 4 years, most of his executives came to him and told him that he was going to have to get Hillary Clinton under control. And all of a sudden, she dropped out of the limelight. Up to then, she was pushing for health care that, of course, was later on passed, or something similar to what she was wanting during Obama's first administration. But you'll think back, people disliked her then. Is it impossible that somebody has hacked the election system? Well, nothing's impossible, but it also wasn't impossible that the sun wouldn't come up this morning, and obviously it has. It's going to. If it doesn't, it'll be the end of the world. They keep on trying to claim that the Soviets hacked the election in this country, which they didn't. Common sense tells anybody that. Now, did they hack computers? Well, sure they did. I can assure you we have too. That's what our security apparatus does in this country, and it's what theirs do, and what other countries do. Also, another minor issue that the news media is aware of, and they did not bother to even mention, was that even though there were tracks that led back to the Soviets hacking the DNC's computer and Hillary Clinton's personal illegal server, also there was tracks leading back to Great Britain, China, France, and several other nations. So what they're purporting is not only preposterous, their argument is disingenuous at best. And I'm probably being too kind. Now, don't misunderstand, I'm not a Trump fan, never will be. I am impressed with some of the people that he has gathered around him to start his administration. Some of those people I'm very impressed with, some not so much. But only time will tell whether Trump will actually take to heart the advice of the advisors that he has put in place. He would be well served too in most instances, although in some instances, like I said, perhaps not so much. The biggest issue with Democrats is not necessarily that the Soviets hacked the computers in this country. Those are the DNC and of Hillary Clinton's. That's like I said, that's actually a non-issue that's going to be done. At least it's a non-issue as far as the election goes. Now, some of the information they gathered from, like Hillary Clinton's private server, perhaps that's a whole different ball game. Some of that information's actually cost U.S. citizens' lives and other operatives that actually work for our country in foreign countries. For that, worse than shame on her. Her arrogance, yet again, has cost people their lives. Those are the reasons why Hillary Clinton was not voted in as president of this nation. Now, the DNC and most of the better-known Democrats and some Republicans, mind you, are very well aware that even though these computers were hacked, that it had no effect whatsoever on the election. Some of the information perhaps did, but all during this time when the national news networks were saying Hillary Clinton's 20 points ahead of Donald Trump, that was very untrue. It's very obvious. The polls, the way they were taken, it's very obvious that they were taken in such a way, and people were questioned in such a way, and the questions were posed to people in certain areas knowing what kind of result they would have. I saw other lesser known polls that has kept Trump very close to Hillary Clinton during the election cycle. And the biggest part of the time, even when they were claiming that Hillary Clinton was 20 or so points ahead, perhaps not all the time, but most of the time, Trump was about 5 points ahead, bouncing between 3 and 5 points, which is about right with the way we hold elections. While we are a republic, we're not a democracy. That's why we do not count individual votes. This false news and false narrative that the Democratic Party and their lapdogs, news media, has been promoting is nothing more than fake news, an absolute false narrative, and it continues on. I don't know why these particular individuals keep on trying to do the same thing in the media and with the news media. But you know, an old saying is the best explanation of being crazy is continuing to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The result's not going to be different. You're not fooling the American public. I'm actually very proud of the American public that they came forward and no longer believe the crap they were throwing out. Now, there are a great many people that are worshipers of the Democratic Party, of Obama, and of Hillary Clinton that are going to believe whatever they tell them. It's not in their best interest to not believe it, so they're going to believe it. The biggest part of this false narrative that's being purported is not that it's true. They know it's not true. They're pretty sure the American people realize this is not true, especially after this last election. But they still want to throw this out here to put doubt in people's mind and try to block anything that Donald Trump does, which, like I've said before, I'm no fan of Donald Trump's, so don't misunderstand. He has some good ideas. Whether he can do these things or not, I'm really not sure. He also has some very poor ideas, very anti-American ideas. But we will have to wait and see. Hopefully he will listen to those around him, so he will understand that we don't do that. This so-called fake news and continuing to do the same thing and expecting an entirely different result is costing the Democratic Party. And while I'm not a Democrat, nor am I a Republican, nor will I ever be either one of the above, there are good points and bad points to both particular parties. What they are doing is shooting themselves in the foot and reducing severely the chance that the Democratic Party can take back control of one or both houses in the next election cycle in 2 years. As I myself have noticed over the years, and with my age, I've lived through quite a few election cycles. Most of the time, if you have a Democratic president, at least one of the houses of Congress will be Republican. By the same token, if you have a Republican president, one or both of the houses of Congress will be Democrat, adding balance. Therefore, unless something is widely agreed with, it's not likely to get through Congress and not suffer veto from the executive branch, which isn't altogether a bad thing. That keeps a lot of people from being subject to the type of forced acceptance of things like Obamacare. Obamacare was never designed to function. The Democratic Party is very well aware of that. President Obama is very well aware of that. As a matter of fact, anyone with any common sense is very well aware of that. What it was designed to do was to fail. And when it failed, here comes the United States government riding in on a white horse, going to save the day, and we have a one-payer system, which will be the U.S. government. And there's already murmurs, and there was early on, of this happening. That's what Obamacare was designed to do. Getting back to the Russians potentially helping Trump win the election, if you'll notice the wording used, they're not saying hacked the voting machines, although they're leading the American public in an attempt to believe that. And unfortunately, there are a few dingbats who actually do believe that. They're saying they helped him to win with release of Hillary Clinton's emails. Well, in the first place, it is important to know that our servers were hacked, the U.S. servers with the DNC. Even more important than that, it's important to know that Hillary Clinton's illegal personal server was hacked. It's also important to know that it cost American lives and American operatives' lives. You have the CIA saying that tracks do lead back to the Russians, but also to the Chinese, to the French, to Great Britain, to several other countries. And the FBI saying the same thing. You have people in the media taking what was actually said out of context. And primarily, in this case, it's the Washington Post who so-called broke this story and was disingenuous in their reporting of it. I have a little bit of news for some of the snowflakes out there. It's like I've said before, most voting machines don't ever get hooked up to the internet, start with, to be hacked. Not only that, the FBI has said there is absolutely no proof that the Soviets even hacked it. There is some circumstantial information, which, like I said, tracks leading back to Russia. But there's no proof. Now, CIA says that there are tracks leading back, which is what they said, and they also had told them that there were tracks leading back to other countries so that they have the potential. Of course, the Washington Post didn't bother to report that. That's their disingenuous argument. But if you stop and think about it, the FBI is a law enforcement organization. They live, eat, and breathe evidence. The CIA, on the other hand, is an espionage type organization. They will live, eat, and breathe evidence, but it's very seldom that they have actual physical evidence. They have information garnered through computers and human intelligence. Now, the CIA being a hammer, to the CIA, everything they run across looks like a nail, so they're going to drive it. So everything's a nail to the CIA. To the FBI, evidence is a nail, and they will drive it home every time they see evidence, whether it's good evidence or bad. The bottom line is that there is no evidence that the Soviets did this. Now, am I sure within me that they have actually hacked our servers in the U.S. government and the DNC servers and Hillary Clinton server? I have no doubt in my mind that's what they do. That's also what we do. And I'll tell you right now, as far as I'm concerned, the news media in this country should be completely disowned. At this point, the National Enquirer has more credibility in my mind than ABC or NBC, CBS, or many other news outlets, including the AP. Now, should our government put them out of business? No. There is this little issue called the First Amendment. Some people seem to think that news organizations, because they report the news, what they report must be the truth. There can be nothing further from the truth. Needless to say, the Washington Post issued this as if it was true, knowing that there was no proof. They're trying to manipulate the American public. And their primary reasons for the progressive, which is actually only another word for a socialist, that's what a progressive is, whether they like being labeled that or not, they are socialists. They are fighting against having anything that they wanted and that President Obama passed and got done with his telephone and his ink pen done away with. Well, I'll tell you right now, a lot of the stuff Obama did was, in my mind, unconstitutional. Best way to get rid of it is just simply do away with it. Wasn't passed through either house of Congress. Shouldn't have been done to start with. Now, I myself have stopped listening to network news. I haven't for several years now. I gather my information from several news sites, some inside and some outside of this country. Very intentional. It's not that I trust them so much, but they're easier to check for facts. You know, things like, what could they possibly have that's in their interest? What could there possibly be in their government's interest to say this or not say that? So I get my information mostly from outside of the country. That's how much trust, or that's how much of a lack of trust I have in the media. Hacker of the emails, I would say highly likely wasn't even somebody out of our country. I've heard some ideas that it very possibly may have actually come from the NSA's hacking. And while that's possible, what do they have to gain or lose? There again, not much. But I'm going to give you another idea that I feel like it is highly likely where it come from. I feel like more than likely the hacking of these emails wasn't a hack at all. I have a feeling they were passed on to WikiLeaks from a disenfranchised and angry supporter of Bernie Sanders within the DNC itself. Do I have any proof of this? Absolutely not. But common sense tells me that's highly likely where it came from, especially with some of the information that came out of these emails, with the DNC itself doing everything they could to sabotage Bernie Sanders' candidacy. And while I'll never support Bernie Sanders in anything, he's just simply another socialist and an unabashed socialist. I really dislike his politics. Nonetheless, I'll never stand idly by and let anybody mistreat and abuse somebody like the DNC did Bernie Sanders. If I, myself, was a worker within the DNC and I saw that the DNC was doing the things they did to Bernie Sanders to ensure his failure, even with me not being a supporter of Bernie Sanders, I would have publicized every bit of it. And knowing me, I probably would have did it bald-faced and right in front of them, just to make sure they knew I did it. You don't treat people like that. Now, all these things that the Democratic Party puts out that, oh, Trump is influenced by the Soviets, or excuse me, by the Russians. Think about all the things that Hillary Clinton has done, ensuring that the Soviet Union could purchase, what was it, 20% of the uranium in our country, accepting donations from not only Russia, but from Russian citizens to her Bill Hillary and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. Really nothing more than a front for a slush fund for themselves. These things that the media in our country and that the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton herself are purporting fall on deaf ears with me, because they're guilty of doing far worse than Trump not hating Vladimir Putin. So the bottom line is, Hillary Clinton was not elected as president of our country because the public in this country doesn't like her. Didn't like her back when Bill was in office, hasn't liked her since then, and still doesn't like her now and won't ever. She is a horrible human being. The DNC made a absolutely horrible mistake in running Hillary Clinton as a presidential candidate. She wasn't electable. If you'll remember back during the beginning of this last election cycle, the Democratic Party and Democrats in general said, yeah, run Trump, because they thought Trump was the only person that Hillary Clinton could beat. Well, come to find out, she couldn't even beat him. As poor of a candidate as Trump is, she couldn't even beat him. And as far as Hillary Clinton not becoming president, she has to remember something, and the DNC does too. They sent forward a very poor candidate for presidency to start with. And to make matters worse, those who disagree with Hillary Clinton are deplorables. We're all deplorables. Well, that's a good way to not get a vote. And it worked for you, Hillary. I stop and think about how far the progressives have been able to push this country all the way out to and including violation of people's civil rights and their constitutionally guaranteed rights. And we're deplorables. Think about all this time that the progressives have been saying, well, it's okay for Obama to do this, that, or the other, use that phone and that pen. Well, now Trump has that phone and that pen. Is it okay for him to do all this stuff his way that he wants to do? I dare say it's not. It's not okay in my book, and I know it's not in your book either. But equally, it wasn't okay for Obama to do it either. Our country is in a very precarious position and has been for quite a few years now. And it's not because of the Democratic Party. It's not because of the Republican Party. It's because of both parties. Can our country come up out of this deep hole we've dug ourselves in? Absolutely it can. That's not even the question. The question is, are the people in this country willing to subject themselves to the pain necessary to avoid a total catastrophic failure of our economy? And I really don't think they are. I would be pleasantly surprised if they were. That would mean a great deal of suffering. That would mean people that are on the government dole having to say no to food stamps, to help with the rent, to help with their electric and gas bills. And that's just not going to happen. There are too many people that don't feel like they should have to work. This has been Bobby with Survival Existence, helping you help yourself. Come visit us on Facebook. Come subscribe to our YouTube channel here at Survival Existence. Come visit us at our website at survivalexistence.com. Have a good day.